So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Marian Allison and I am the Director of the Cld Standards Council. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I have the pleasure of doing the introduction and being the hostess for the mostess in some part for the afternoon. I'm delighted to be joined with my colleagues from the Cld Standards Council and Education Scotland. So with us today we have Kirsty Gemmell, Maggie Patterson and John Galt. Nicola Sykes will join in too. So plenty of people here to ask lots of really difficult and hard questions too. But I'm not including myself in that, of course. So what are we going to cover? We've basically got an hour and a half to have a look at all things CLD workforce. This happens to be the fifth event, the fifth webinar, that's looking at some of the things that our CLD managers might need to think about and consider when pulling together the CLD plans, because I guess you don't need me to remind you that they're all due in by September later on this year. And I know that work is happening at pace right across the country to try and get the individual local authority plans into something that's fit for purpose, that meets your community needs and that meets your workforce needs too. And when we were looking across the breadth of the ask that people need to do for these CLD plans, we were thinking about the workforce thing, purely because that's been one area of concern, obviously, for us in the Cld Standards Council, but also across Education Scotland. And I know for people that are out in the field and practitioners, ideas of workforce development spring very much to mind. So really, if you think about what the guidance actually says in terms of a CLD workforce, there is a number of expectations. So one of the things that comes up is about providing practice placements for CLD students. So how do you write that into your plan? What does that look like? What is a CLD student? Is it about a modern apprenticeship? Is it about an FE student? Or is it your typical university student? What time does that take? How does that help with workforce planning? How does that impact upon your sessional and part-time staff? And what does that look like for the groups and the communities that you're actually serving? The second point is about recruiting qualified CLD practitioners at the appropriate level of practice or leadership across all areas of adult learning, community development, family learning and youth work. Again, that's one of these really broad brush statements, but when you really start to dive in, there could be quite a lot of challenges. What is an appropriate level of practice? So are you looking for somebody that's got 3 years experience, 5 years experience, or that's just in the door? Does it need to be somebody who's carrying a fully approved CLD qualification, or is an equivalent enough for your particular area? How do we join the dots across adult learning, community development, family learning and youth work qualifications? And ultimately, what does that mean for you guys as recruiting managers to make sure that the communities that you're serving actually have the best practitioners that they need to meet their needs? And lastly, there is the point about supporting the CLD workforce in its area across all the sectors to benefit from engaging with the Standards Council through registered membership. And again, that's a really wide-ranging topic. How do you know if people are benefiting from membership of the Standards Council? What does that look like? Is this something that you as an employer ask for people to do? John's also and myself will talk at some points about some of the issues that have been identified in working with Scotland's communities. The last workforce survey that we did in 2018, and we'll mention some of the workforce surveys that the Cld Standards Council have done across the impact of the COVID pandemic over the last year or so. And we will at some point have considerations about the actions that are required to demonstrate the commitment to the CLD workforce and support through partnerships and working with a range of providers to deliver outcomes for young people and communities across Scotland. So there's quite a lot in there in terms of what it is that we actually are going to discuss this afternoon and what it is that we can do. And I think really for us in terms of the Cld Standards Council, over the last year, as I said, we have done some workforce surveys asking people what does it look like, what has been the main issues, And some of the things that we found out in 2018 haven't indeed gone away, so issues of diversity, issues of pay gaps in terms of the gender issue is there. We've got a wide variety of training, but it's not all connected. We've got a really highly committed workforce, but it's a bit stressed out. And what do we need in terms of leadership and digital skills, which I guess over the last year have really come to our mind. Right through the COVID pandemic, we were able to see quite clearly that CLD practitioners, regardless of where they were appointed, were working across the breadth of the practice. So your usual job might have been within youth work, but all of a sudden you were doing family learning, community development, governance support, ESOL, and you were doing it in a blended fashion. It wasn't just about physical face-to-face delivery, working with groups. People very swiftly moved on to a mixture of online learning, digital learning, and still providing a lot of befriending services and actually tapping on people's doors. One thing that I think was just highlighted, although not new to us in the CLD sector, was the notion of practitioners working across 7 days a week, evenings and weekends. And I think that really became apparent for the support that was given to those that were working within hub areas, particularly around about schools and neighbourhood groupings. We know that we have provided as a CLD sector that essential link between people and learners and the institutions surrounding them, whether that be councils, colleges, government and community services. CLD practitioners have absolutely been that connecting link. And really key to that and fundamental to that has been our individual knowledge and access to networks at a local level. That real community knowledge has not gone amiss. And one of the things that we really did know, and just at the extent to which we work with marginalised communities, with really strong examples coming of people working with families, people with addictions, homeless, black minority ethnic, refugees, asylum seekers in the disabled community, some of that work just springs to mind. So these are just some of the kind of workforce things that we've got to think about and consider. And I guess for us as the CLD Standards Council, one of our key things to do in response to that, we've tried to have a look at what learning programmes are out there. And Maggie Patterson, who we have on the call today, spent much of the last year trying to help us map out what learning opportunities, what the availability is for CLD pathways across Scotland. And we can certainly provide people with that report. Some of that will come out more in the conversation that we're actually move into it. And now I'm going to have a wee look to see what's coming up in the chat, because I can't see at the moment. No, everybody's just saying hello. Okay, so at this point, is everybody quite content with what I've just outlined, or does anybody have any burning issues or questions, or are we content to move into the group work session at this point? No, Sheila, you're not high-fiving me, so I'm taking it that everybody's quite happy to move into the group work session. So the first thing that we're going to look at is our lovely Kirsty is going to talk about CLD Standards Council membership and give us a short introduction. And the kind of key discussion question here is around how can the CLD Standards Council help you to promote the benefits of registration. So now I am assured that there's going to be some sort of wizardry happens and we will all be shifted into some sort of fabulous groups. So I'm looking forward to speaking with you shortly. Take it away, Kirsty.
So thanks, Marion. We'll do a wee input to the whole group and then go into discussion groups. And it will be a short input, just to say the expectation, as I'm sure is imprinted on your brains by now, in the plan's guidance is that you will support the CLD workforce in your area across all sectors to benefit from engaging with the CLD Standards Council through registered membership. So not much then, in your area, all sectors, benefits of engagement, because you know them all off by heart. So what we want to know from today is, what can we do to help you do that? What can the Standards Council do? There are things that we already do, and some of you may have had the pleasure of my company at team meetings or organisational inputs. where I can come and talk about the benefits of membership. I can support people to register. We can look at what's on iDevelop and encourage people to register so that they can get access to different professional learning opportunities. We've got a registration video, a short video that we pulled together last year, which you can get access to. I'll put some links in the chat, and we'll also send out links after the session today so that you've got things to hand. We've got a whole load of partnership working. We are members of different organisations, which gives us benefits that we can pass on to the membership. But how do we let you know about all of this, and how do we support you to encourage practitioners, staff or volunteers to become registered or associate members? So the way we're going to work today is that there will be this kind of few minutes input, and then we'll go into discussion groups for about 10 minutes. We've got a Padlet, which I know some people might be comfortable using and some people might not be particularly comfortable using. Don't worry, if you're not comfortable using it, or you're on your phone and you can't open up another screen because you've got your phone and you're looking at us, and why would you not want to look at us, then we've got some note takers in each of the groups. So just make sure that you get your points across. So I've put the link to the Padlet in the chat, so feel free to, oh, and so is John. John's good. John's put it in too. Feel free to have a look at that, and you'll see the questions that are there. So we are looking at the first set of questions at this point. So I think we are okay to go into discussion groups now. You'll have a facilitator, you'll have somebody to take notes. Tell us what you need.
Welcome back from the quickest 10 minutes ever, everybody. My name is Maggie Patterson, and I'm going to just quickly introduce our next short discussion, which is about the expectation around recruiting qualified CLD practitioners at the appropriate level of practice or leadership across all areas of adult learning, community development, family learning and youth work. As Marion mentioned earlier, there was a survey working with Scotland's communities back in 2018, and one of the things that analysis found was that while most employers were clear that an approach and ethos of CLD was essential to the work, there were also employers at that time, 2018, who felt that there was a shift towards non-qualified CLD workers, and that could negatively affect the field. They believed that a lack of appropriate theoretical background could impact both on the work that we do with communities, as well as strategic planning and the direction of community learning and development. The survey also found a significant variation between employers in the public sector and the third sector in terms of the requirement for staff to be qualified in specific posts, with a large majority of the public sector employers requiring CLD qualifications, while around half of the third sector employers did not really place much emphasis on staff holding CLD qualifications. So following on from that, the Standards Council did some work that published a review in June of last year of career pathways for community learning and development practitioners, and it made a number of recommendations about developing and promoting professional learning opportunities for CLD practitioners to ensure that we had an accessible pathway of accredited stepping stones, creating more options for people who wanted to gain qualifications in CLD. The report found that there was considerable scope for promotion of CLD as a viable career choice, but this needs to be underpinned by employers recruiting qualified CLD staff and citing CLD qualifications as essential in job specifications. in the conversation that I've just come out of, a colleague was saying how difficult it was to get qualified staff in the area where he works. And I suppose that's where the kind of chicken and egg thing comes in. If we don't ask for CLD qualifications, then people aren't seeing CLD as a career pathway, as a career choice, and then we end up not actually having qualified staff when we come to look for them. Another issue related with this is that currently there's no nationally agreed and endorsed framework to guide employers like yourselves regarding the recruitment of qualified staff. What is appropriately qualified? It's quite a challenging question. The Standards Council has committed to working alongside key stakeholders and employers to develop and agree such a framework in consultation with the field. So that would definitely be in consultation with the folks that are along here this afternoon. CLD comprises diverse roles practiced in such a range of settings. This allows us in CLD to be dynamic, proactive and responsive to need, but it brings with it the curse of complexity and makes the creation of a framework like this quite a challenge. Early thoughts that we've had are around perhaps considering qualifications appropriate to the types of role rather than the job title. Other thoughts are perhaps that we would need potential applicants to be given leeway to achieve the required qualifications when they come into post, something like within a 3-year time frame or something like that. So there'll be lots of opportunities for you going forward to participate in discussions about this framework. But in the meantime, when we go into our groups, what we're wanting you to chat about is how can we encourage the recruitment of qualified CLD practitioners? What can your CLD partnership do to encourage that across the voluntary sector and the public sector? And how can the CLD Standards Council help you to do that? So I think we're in good time, Nicola, just to have our full short 10 minutes to go into our discussion groups again on that. Zoom away or team away to you, Nicola. Thank you. Maybe that wasn't quite the shortest 10 minutes ever, but it was still quite short, but certainly hopefully everyone had a chance to get a bit of discussion going on the issue of qualifications and how the Standards Council might help. I'm going to introduce the final discussion part of this afternoon, which looks at another of the expectations set out in the guidance, the one about providing practice placements for CLD students. Placement students are the future of community learning and development, whether they're FE students or HE students. The availability and accessibility of placements is vital to our profession going forward. So certainly the Standards Council, we were really pleased to see that be included in the guidance to you and the expectations to you about what's in, about taking a student and what should be in the workforce development section of your plans. But I know quite a lot of you. Why should you and your CLD partners and your partnerships take time out of your extremely busy lives to take on a student? And that's what we're going to think about today. Placements are not only about increasing the employability of CLD student practitioners. There are benefits for yourselves as placement agencies as well. I mean, there's the obvious one of increasing organisational provision. This is someone that can support your learners and your communities. But having a placement student also encourages you, the host agency, to reflect and revisit the principles and practices of your organisation. It creates a space for everyone to learn and reflect in a collaborative way. For the placement supervisors themselves, there are opportunities it's an opportunity to develop their professional education, supervision, and their leadership skills. It prompts them to critically reflect on their own practice, which we know we always do as CLD practitioners, but it's good to have a little prompt every so often, isn't it? And it's also good to be kept up to date with current theories and evidence around CLD. Supporting the provision and quality of placements is central to what we do in the Standards Council, and considerable emphasis is given to this in the CLDSC, our approval process. In order to be approved, we look very closely at the proportion of the placement and the quality of the placement. And we are currently converting the practice placement guidance that maybe some of you are familiar with to practice placement standards. That's how important we feel the placement is. A good placement agency is one that has thought seriously about the implications of taking a student CLD practitioner into their organisation. The central commitment from the agency is around that practice placement supervisor. But here again, in terms of the availability of, we're encouraging folk to provide placements, the availability of appropriately qualified and experienced CLD staff to take on the role of supervisors is also an issue that we know about, and we've been talking with yourselves and others about how best to address that, and potentially creating a bank of CLD supervisors. We're also, I know that some of you on the call have been involved in our work to develop a training resource for practice placement supervisors, and we're hoping to pilot something like that in the autumn. So supervisors are crucial to the placement. You're probably aware already that there's a range of CLD programs. Really all CLD programs have a placement element to them in the degrees that we approve. That's a set proportion there. And on the developmental route, which covers courses like the PDA and support for adult literacies learners, SVQs and youth work, HNC, working with communities, the placement is key there. And those students, the CLD profession and the CLD Standards Council is keen for there to be placements for these students to learn what it's all about. So one of the things that we're thinking about is the development of a placement directory, but we'll talk a bit more about that when we're in the groups. What would help and encourage you to offer a placement. Just before we go into the discussion groups again, just want to say that since the outbreak of COVID, since the pandemic hit us, the Standards Council has been collaborating with the UK-wide Joint Education Training Standards Committee, and we've been issuing regular updates and advice to guide FE and HE institutions and their placement providers. And so that's all been out there. Some of you will be aware of that if you're currently placement providers. And interesting, although we hope never to be in this position again, there actually have been lots of examples of innovative developments and good practice developing that will continue to be used and will be useful in going forward in placement terms as things ease up and as we hopefully leave the pandemic behind us soon enough. So we want everybody to take placements. So now you know there's lots of benefits to having one. You know there's lots of support out there for you to take a placement. So we're going to go into the breakout groups again to think a bit further about, I've mentioned some things, but what other things would encourage you to take a placement student, and how can the Standards Council help with that? I just wanted to kind of wind that last section up to say thank you to everyone for your contributions, and to let you know that they've been recorded and on the Padlets, and really that was very useful. But also to say, as Marion will probably say more about this later, but the Standards Council has written out to all of the chief executives of the local authorities that have to lead on the pulling together of the CLD plans, and we've made an offer of support. Hopefully you've become aware of that through your various connections. But as part of that, we're offering them support in particular around these three expectations that we've just discussed just now, about placements, about appropriate qualifications, and about registration. So it's going to be really useful to have had your input and your contribution in these last discussions as we finalise what that support is actually going to look like. So thanks very much for that, and it will, as I say, be reflected upon and fed into the ongoing support that we're offering out to CLD partnerships. So thanks for that. So shall I just pass over to John Galt now? John, thanks very much for going to speak to us about the plans themselves and what we've learned from previous plans. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Maggie. Can I just check that people can see those slides? Can somebody tell me, please?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, now I know Marion wants to get to talking about a national workforce plan, so I will try and keep this brief. And just to let you know, the slides I'm going to nip through here, we will share them with you at the end. The slide that's up there at the moment is the stuff that we've been talking about through the session today. What are the expectations that are in the Scottish Government guidance around workforce development for CLD plans? So the questions we've just been discussing there are those last three bullet points. I suppose just wanted to put in some pointers maybe more about the first two bullets up there. So obviously when you're putting your CLD plans together, your workforce development priorities will be driven from your identified need locally. But there is an expectation from government that the CLD partnerships are taking cognizance of the national evidence base, and also that second bullet point about aiming to have specific actions around CLD workforce development. So when we talk about the evidence base, we've talked already today about the workforce survey from back in 2018. I'm just going to mention a few pointers from the review of the last round of CLD plans and some of the stuff that's there in the HMI evidence base, which people will be aware of the summary reports that came out last year. And Marion and Maggie have already talked about the workforce survey, so I'm just going to nip through this, but as I say, we'll share the slides. I suppose one of the key points when we did a review of the CLD planning documents the last time round was that very much workforce development was highlighted as a priority in most of the plans. There was certainly evidence in most of the plans that people were looking at what the local professional learning needs were, but there was probably less evidence, or certainly in fewer plans, just over half had any kind of specific outcomes or commitments that talked about taking forward workforce development, and there was maybe quite a few of the plans were quite vague on that, and that's why the government guidance this time round is asking people to try and be as specific as possible. These are just a slide with some examples of some of the priorities that were in there last time. There's nothing particularly scientific about that. So, but you know, if you're sitting thinking, I wonder what on earth workforce development priorities might look like in our CLD plan, then those are just some pointers from what was in plans in 2018 to 21. Moving on to the inspection evidence, and obviously there's the broader kind of strength and areas for improvement that you know, will inform CLD plans. You know that inspectors do look at impact on staff and volunteers, and as that slide shows, again, I'm not going to read it all out, but actually there, in that evidence base from 2016 to 2019, there's a lot to take heart from in terms of impact of staff and volunteers. Inspectors saw positive things around professional learning, around joint planning and workforce development, and you know, there was some real strengths in terms of what they were seeing in inspections. Some of the pointers that inspectors have flagged up. First one around, in some cases, a lack of coordination between partners in terms of particularly looking around training or CPD opportunities. Second bullet there, while volunteering is a strong element of CLD planning, there were certainly some areas where coordination of support to volunteers could be better. And the last one there, the, you know, short bullet, but big challenges, particularly for local authorities, where the numbers of CLD staff is declining, and you know, the limits on capacity of CLD services. And at the time, they were particularly identifying reduction in community-based adult learning practitioners. So some very quick pointers there in terms of things to think about when you're looking at your plans. Obviously, all that evidence base is pre-pandemic. So, as Marion said right at the beginning, those priorities, a lot of them are still relevant, but some of them will have changed. There'll be new priorities as well. So, just some thoughts there in terms of some of the things from my own experience. Obviously, a renewed focus on, when we're looking at workforce development priorities, on supporting the health and well-being of staff, as well as looking at building their skills or looking at career pathways and so on. Huge area around digital access and skills, as we know, and that's about making sure practitioners have access to what they need, and also access to effective CPD to be building their skills. A lot of discussion within the sector. You may have been involved in these discussions around, a lot of work was done at the beginning of the pandemic to just get people engaged, but as we move forward and as we look at online and blending activity, what does good quality look like, and what skills do staff need to ensure that it's good quality CLD activity that's taking place. And I suppose the move to digital, we've also seen huge changes in how CPD opportunities can be delivered. So that can lead to more access for some people, it can be barriers for other people. So what does accessible and inclusive online or blended CPD look like in the future? I'd encourage you to think about what other practice areas might have come to the fore over the pandemic and are likely to be requirements for staff over the next 3 years. So loads of examples of people focusing more on support and learning at home, or outdoor learning, or detached work. Obviously, as we move hopefully into the recovery phase, the balance might change in these, but it's thinking about what practice areas that maybe you hadn't thought of before might be ones that you have to build into your plan to support this time round. And going back to the beginning there, leadership was identified as one of the key areas in quite a lot of the plans last time round, building CLD leadership. But what does that look like as we move into a recovery and a rebuilding phase? I'll leave you with this last slide, which some of you will be familiar with, but thought it was just worth reminding you that CLD Manager Scotland have put together a template checklist for people who are working on their CLD plans at the moment. Just a practical list of the kind of questions that you might want to consider. And these are the questions that are related to workforce development. So does your plan really, does it capture clearly identified workforce development needs locally? Are those needs clearly linked to the outcomes that you're looking to deliver in your plan? Do those outcomes and plans, do they reflect the needs of all the partners in your partnership? And do you have shared responsibility for the delivery of relevant elements of workforce development evidence in your plans? So we can share the link to the checklist if you haven't seen it already. But that was all that I wanted to say. I think I'm going to pass over to Marion now. Marion, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, John. So I will very quickly run through this because I do actually have a 16-slide presentation, and conscious that I would rather we had a bit of chat. But really some of the thinking that we've been doing in and around the Standards Council fits with, as you know, growing the learning culture, which is one of the kind of key aspects of the professional learning offer of the CLD Standards Council. That very much thinks about you as an individual CLD practitioner, but also what is an employer offering, what is the digital offer that's out there, and what about technology. But that exists within a wider industry, as we know, and that's becoming closer in our mind's eye, should I say, with the development of the new youth work strategy and the new adult learning strategy. Common to both strategies is the idea of workforce development. So what does the youth work sector need? What does the adult learning sector need? But actually when you look at it, it's about what does the CLD sector actually need? What is the strategy? How do we start to try and action that? And having various conversations across the Scottish Government and with key stakeholders and members of the Standards Council, primarily there is something about the CLD career pathway, about the recognition of us as an actual profession as well as a practice. We need better data in terms of our labour market, where people are actually going through the CLD learning process. One of the things that we've identified working with the FE and HE sector is, for instance, the naming of courses being really problematic. So you'll have Introduction to Health and Youth and Community, or Community Development and Creativity. So they're all CLD approved programmes, but nowhere does it say CLD. So if you're an actual learner that's looking to kind of go through the CLD pathway, it's not overtly clear in terms of actually you should be aiming to get to the CLD degree, which could be called the community education or youth and community work or community development and or. So one of the suggestions that some of the FE and HE people have said is maybe we should look at prefixing things with CLD. So for instance, CLD Introduction to Youth Work, CLD ESOL for adult learners, or whatever the course is, you know, but to help just build identity, but without taking away the need to have that local provision that's fit for your community or your college or your learners. So there's something in there about the naming of the infrastructure that's actually there to better signpost. So for us, that's also doing a bit of work also with Skills Development Scotland. Again, one of the gaps that we've identified is that our institutions are very heavily relying on employers paying for their staff to do their degree programmes. There's not quite so many people that will pick up a prospectus and go, oh, I want to go and do a degree in community work. Most people get into CLD because of somebody that they've actually known, because they can see it and it's touchable. But what about all those people that are out there that would be great to come and work in this sector, but the visibility and the marketing of it could be improved across the board? So that's one of the other things that we're kind of hoping to build upon. The whole infrastructure in terms of barriers, what we do know is that the universities are still recruiting mainly women, mainly older women, and it's still mainly white older women, you know, so that doesn't reflect the communities that we work with across Scotland. So there's maybe a bit of support for the HE-FE sector in terms of what does that recruitment look like, what do employers actually need. Maggie did a whole load of work last year around about the SCQF framework to try and work out, so if you come in at SCQF level 1, how do you get up to level 12 within a CLD world, within a CLD career pathway? It is not absolutely perfect, but these are some of the things that we want to consider going forward. This is going to be really quite timely in terms of, so do we move towards having a kind of CLD workforce strategy? Every other workforce does have quite a clear strategy. This became quite apparent over the course of COVID. I was sitting on the Ministerial Learner Journey pathway, which was looking at how do we get all the students back into college and university and what do they need. And actually the CLD Standards Council's work with students was actually heralded as being really good practice because we offered so many different alternatives to our students that actually some of the health professions were saying, oh, actually that's really good what they've offered or how they're thinking about their students and their career pathways. But there's something about how do we build on that kind of recognition of us as an actual sector. The manifesto, if anybody had been on manifesto watch, you will have seen that the SNP had made a clear commitment to looking at the legislation surrounding CLD, so there might be things to think about in terms of what's the implications of the workforce. It's all very well having all these strategies about youth work, community work, adult learning, but what about the actual people that are delivering it on the ground? Do we actually have the infrastructure? Interesting to hear today from people saying we'll be looking to recruit, but where are we going to get these students? Where are we going to get practitioners from? Is there a shortage or is there a glut? Provision of service across, provision of learning opportunities across the country is far from equal. What you can expect to tap into in the Central Belt is considerably different to what you would get in the North East or Highlands and Islands. And we've recently had an example of a learner from Orkney being able to tap into an offer in Glasgow Kelvin College. And so some of the digital disruptions really helped some of the pathways that we've got out there too. So I'm actually just going to stop there because we have got some ideas to think about, and I'm hoping that by the time the CLD plans are in, it'll be interesting to see what people are looking for in terms of their support. And does this help us to augment that argument that, look, across the country, this is what the ask is, this is what the delivery is, this is what we need to do to help better to support this workforce? Because I guess in amongst the COVID recovery, the move towards a well-being economy, which is absolutely the ambition of the economic recovery group, which includes social and cultural developments. I would say that we're not going to be able to do that in Scotland without a CLD workforce and without a proper CLD pathway from volunteering right through to management positions too. So that's the kind of thinking, and I'd be more than happy to send the presentation that I did in Tayside a few weeks ago. Gwen, I think I've already sent it to you, but there's quite a lot of data and information. I was conscious that we only had 10 minutes. So I'm happy now to move into any of the questions and comments that people might have. I might not know all the answers. In fact, I very rarely do. So if it's a really particularly hard question, can I ask that you'd send that to John Gall or Nicola Sykes or somebody else, because they're much more intelligent and well informed than me. So, but happy to take any questions or comments from people.